Another story that I'm sure a number of you followed quite closely, but that I was, unable to cover over the last couple of weeks is Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. Okay. Um, Now, whatever your opinions of China are, or whatever your opinions of Taiwan are, I think the main point here is just how reckless and escalatory a move that was from the Speaker of the House. All for a photo op, all for a publicity stunt, right? Even going against what the Biden administration said. Now they've had some mixed messaging on this too, but the statement at the time was that the military had concerns about that and would not have advised that Pelosi go to Taiwan. So I want to show you guys a quick clip here. Again, whatever your opinions of China or Taiwan are, to me it's kind of immaterial. What matters here is the history of this stuff. So I have a clip from Breakthrough News that dives into the history, just at least the rudimentary level of the history, and why I think some Americans might be misunderstanding or misinterpreting that history. So we'll take a watch here, come back, and discuss.
Pelosi is set to visit Taiwan during her Asia tour, a visit which some people are saying might trigger World War III. Chinese President Xi Jinping warned the United States that this Taiwan visit was akin to playing with fire. The Chinese military made a post on Chinese social media, quote, "preparing for war," a post which racked up 300,000 likes in 12 hours. Why is Pelosi's visit such a big deal? What's so contentious about Taiwan? To answer these questions, we're going to need to go over some basic history. Taiwan has been a part of China for centuries. People from the Chinese mainland sailed across the Taiwan Strait as early as the 12th century. For a while, Taiwan was part of Fujian province, the mainland province closest to Taiwan, before becoming its own Chinese province in 1886. In 1895, China loses the Sino-Japanese War and is forced to turn over Taiwan to the Japanese Empire. Taiwan exists as a Japanese colony called Formosa for the next 50 years until the collapse of the Japanese Empire in 1945 at the end of World War II. Taiwan was set to return to China, but at the time, China itself lacked a unified government. There was a civil war in China between the Chinese nationalists, led by Chiang Kai-shek, and the Chinese communists, led by Mao Zedong. When Chiang Kai-shek loses, his nationalist forces retreat from the mainland and set themselves up in Taiwan. This is when the Taiwan issue begins. Unwilling to accept that they lost the war, Chiang Kai-shek self-declares completely ridiculously from this small island of Taiwan that he represents the real government of China, what he calls the Republic of China. At this point, the Communist Party controls all of mainland China, where 540 million people live. To any rational person, regardless of ideology, it's obvious that this is the new government. But the United States, eager to undermine communism, goes along with this absurd claim and backs up Chiang Kai-shek and refuses to recognize the new communist government. The US then uses its superpower status to coerce other countries into recognizing Taiwan, and even gave Taiwan China's seat at the UN Security Council instead of the actual government in Beijing. This would be like if the Confederacy, after losing their secessionist war, decided that instead of surrendering and re-entering the Union, they would retreat all of their forces to an island off of Florida and declare themselves the new seat of the US government, and then have all their pro-Confederate allies like Britain send diplomats and weapons to them and refuse to recognize Washington, D.C. Do you think people here would accept that? But the most egregious part of all of this is that the United States abandoned this absurd position and signed an agreement saying so in 1972. The Shanghai Communique, the treaty that ends over 20 years of severed diplomatic ties between the US and China, recognizes that Taiwan is part of China. This was such a core issue that there was no scenario under which China would have agreed to reopening diplomatic relations without the US recognizing this basic aspect of China's sovereignty. And the thing is, even the nationalists in Taiwan recognize that Taiwan is part of China. So is China overreacting to Nancy Pelosi's trip? Ever since 1979, no US head of state and no leader of the ruling party has ever visited Taiwan. No Taiwanese leader has come to Washington in decades either. So at a time when US-China relations are the tensest they've been in decades, for the US to send the third-ranking political leader to Taiwan, likely to meet with leaders of the government they don't formally recognize, in defiance of the government they do recognize, is going to be seen as breaking their own treaty. China's calling it a strategic-level provocation. This is not some minor issue to them. So why is the US doing this? It's because the rise of China threatens the US's status as the sole world empire. They want to weaken, intimidate, or as crazy as it sounds, overthrow the Chinese government. It's part of a larger strategy of great power conflict, which is to step by step put China under total pressure with tariffs, sanctions, bringing huge amounts of US naval power around the mainland, instigating separatist movements, and political instability. The US isn't seeking a head-on confrontation with the enormous Chinese military, but these sorts of measures climb the escalation ladder, which make an accident that could trigger something like that all the more likely. So the question for us is, who exactly asked Nancy Pelosi to do this? Where are the droves of people clamoring for the US to incite war against China? Nancy Pelosi tried to justify her trip saying it's about security. But if Congress really cared about security, they would be addressing inflation, healthcare, or climate change instead of dragging us into World War III.
So I just thought that was a solid breakdown to just literally provide the history here, you guys, right? Like, again, whatever your opinions of the Chinese Communist Party are, they're kind of immaterial here. I thought the Confederacy analogy was a very good one. This is just a matter of recognizing sovereign power. That's really that's it. And in every official capacity that as far as I understand, in every official capacity, Taiwan is recognized as part of China. So this is really just not up for much debate. Again, you can despise China if you would like. That's an ideological issue or a political opinion issue. But whether or not Taiwan is independent is really just not up for much reasonable debate. And I think that Confederacy analogy is a very good one. How would the United States react if, upon losing a civil war, the Confederacy claimed that they were the true United States government and seceded to Cuba and started taking weapons from all around the world and taking visitors and declaring themselves the official government of the United States? So this is just about recognizing where sovereign power exists and recognizing the incentives of each power involved here. Obviously the United States, again, regardless of what your position on China is or your opinion of China is, obviously the United States has a desire to put pressure on China and to push back against China growing or obtaining more power on the international stage. So I think that the incentive here is quite convenient, and I think the history is also quite clear. So that is why this was deemed such a big deal, and I think that there are a lot of Americans who might just kind of look at this like, well, if they want to be independent, they should be independent. And I think that's looking at this in a way that's devoid of the historical context. It's that argument, take that to the nth degree, right? What if my city wants to secede from the United States? Well, we want to, so should we have the right to be independent if we want to secede from the United? You could get into some very odd sort of convoluted debates about this, right? If you take that kind of argument to the nth degree. So, this was obviously, and again, even so, to me, the important part is actually one layer even removed from that. Even if you fervently believe that Taiwan should be independent, what Pelosi did with her trip was not productive to that end, but was provocative and escalatory and increased tensions. So the United States has this weird complex of thinking that we are the world police, thinking that we have the right to deem various, like what we did with Juan Guaido. We just decide this person's now the leader here. We think that we have the right to stick our fingers in everybody else's business and use our military might and our power on the world stage with sanctions and trade policy and all this kind of stuff. We think we get to leverage that to dictate what everybody else does, okay? So to me, personally, and I'm far from an expert on this issue, to me, the United States has no role to play in the conflict between China and Taiwan. And Pelosi deciding to go visit Taiwan is simply an escalatory, unnecessary, reckless move, and she did it all for a photo op. And it's also worth noting, you guys, who actually supports what Pelosi did. It's the Republican Party that supports what Pelosi did. You don't see even very many Democrats that are in support of this. As I said, the Biden administration has given mixed messages, but they were pretty down on this trip when it happened, the military and the administration. So the interesting political dynamic in that sense, I suppose, that you have Republicans cheering on Pelosi, visiting Taiwan. But to me, the whole point is it was unnecessary and escalatory, and to do that just for a photo op before a midterm, I think is completely reckless. So that's my view. And again, I think people get too caught up. We do this thing where whenever a story comes out about a person or a country or an institution or a party or fill in the blank, we let our opinions of that thing determine how we view the story. And again, I think your opinion of China is immaterial to this discussion. So I would encourage people, like when a story comes out about AOC, don't let your opinion of AOC cloud your opinion of the story. When a story comes out about Russia, or when a story comes out about the U.S. government or whatever, or a political party or an institution or an organization, don't let your opinion of that thing cloud your view of the entire story. And yet it seems kind of like that's how it ends up happening in this country, is that all these things just fall down partisan lines based upon the ideology and the framing to start with. So I thought what Pelosi did was reckless. I thought it was irresponsible. And, I'm glad that no immediate sparks flew. I do think it increased tensions, and I think it was, on the by and large, a very, very reckless thing for her to do. So I just wanted to touch on that. Shout out to Breakthrough for the breakdown on the historical context, and just wanted to touch on that. And we have one more Pelosi clip. This is about domestic issues, about how her rhetoric on Republicans is completely contradictory. Huge shout out to Josh for this super chat. I appreciate you, Josh. Thank you so much. Once again, you guys, realprogressives.org/donate if you want to help us out, or you can leave a super chat like Double K and Josh have been kind enough to do. So I'm going to try to show you guys this clip, although I couldn't download it, so you're going to have to bear with me for just a second while I try to figure out how I can make sure to get you guys audio here. Share tab audio. Okay. Let's see if this will work. This is Pelosi being pressed on her. I guess I should set this up a little better before I actually play it. This is Pelosi was pressed on how she spent, how the Democrats, are spending a whole bunch of money on right-wing candidates running in Republican primaries, right? So Pelosi's all over the place on the rhetoric here. She often says that we need a strong Republican Party, while she also fearmongers about the right wing and says that they're a threat to democracy. While she also funds the right-wing candidates against the moderate Republicans that she rhetorically says she wants to see take back the Republican Party. She was pressed on this quite brilliantly, and obviously it's a massive, massive internal inconsistency, a massive contradiction, and a massive hypocrisy here. So we'll watch. This is just a short clip of her having to respond to some questions about that.
You repeatedly said that you want Republicans to take back their party. You said in a quote, "Here I am, Nancy Pelosi, saying this country needs a strong Republican Party, not a cult." How does that square with your party now spending money to boost election-denying candidates in Republican primaries, including against House Republicans who voted to impeach President Trump?
I said that we need a strong Republican Party, not a cult of personality. That didn't mean we shouldn't have a strong Democratic Party as well. And the political decisions that are made out there are made in furtherance of our winning the election, because we think the contrast between Democrats and Republicans as they are now is so drastic that we have to win. And I feel confident win. I just see, what's that called? The 6 points, 44 to, what's it called, the poll? George has it? Yeah. Well, anyway, the most recent poll that came out has us 44 to 38. This whole thing has changed. But make no mistake, I've said to you, we have every intention of winning this election. As people make judgments in campaigns around the country, that's that. But it has nothing to do with whether we should have a strong, grand old party, which has done great things for our country. Yes. Yeah.
So I hope you guys had audio for that. I had to bring it up a slightly different way than I usually do, but I hope you could hear. She's basically spewing gobbledygook, is what you just essentially heard. Pelosi obviously caught in a massive contradiction here, you guys. They coming out of the Dobbs decision, they fundraised on the abortion issue and fear-mongered about the right wing. Coming out of the election, they fear-mongered about the Stop the Steal stuff. And by the way, the right is completely wrong about all of those issues. Like, the Democrats are armed to do this because the right is so off their rocker and unhinged in these regards. But they used these issues, the Democrats, to fundraise for the midterms. And now they're pumping a decent chunk of that money towards the right-wing extreme candidates that they fear-mongered about in order to bring the money in. So Democrats might as well have said, MAGA's really scary. If you'd like to help out MAGA, donate to the Democrats. Obviously, they're doing this under the guise that they think they can beat the more extreme candidates, and perhaps in some swing districts, there's some truth to that. But you guys, this was Hillary's strategy in 2016 to elevate Donald Trump because she was so sure she could beat him. So the same party whose entire message, whose entire existence is completely and solely based upon we are not Trump, we are not Republicans, we are anti-MAGA. That is their entire image, their entire messaging, strategy. And yet they're pumping money into MAGA candidates. So the hypocrisy here is off the charts, right? Pelosi always saying we need a strong grand old party, and what she means is we need the moderates to take back over. Now she's funding the moderates' opponents that are extreme right-wingers that she fearmongers about in order to bring the money in the first place. The extent of the hypocrisy, you guys, I can't even fathom, let alone explain. So shame on Pelosi and the Democrats for engaging in this kind of politics. Meanwhile, of course, they shout down any attempt to challenge their members from the left. Right? Pelosi herself will go campaign for the corporatist anti-choice asshole who just proposed that gig bill we covered earlier, Henry Cuellar, against a progressive pro-choice candidate. They just have absolutely no shame. The resources they're using in this midterm are to swing things to the right. No shame whatsoever. And I thought that clip sort of pointed that out. Good on whatever reporter it was that actually pushed her on that. Good on them, because that shit they're never asked about that. Never asked about that.